We'll get started with the webinar today. We're going to be doing some 3D stuff like this. To give a brief overview on how we did this, and then I'll show you step by step so you can follow along. I created the base of this 3D model. I created the islands on the corners here, and then the pockets inside of those islands. And then I extruded this, center piece up. And then on one side, I did an extrude cut for the hole with this diameter. And then I went on another side of 3D modeling to do a pocket, or to create this slot here on the side here as well, or on the front, you could call it. So I'm going to go to a new file so you guys can follow along if you'd like. I first go to a new file here and go to the top and go to Create 2D. I went to the rectangle function. And to get my rectangle where the bottom left corner is at the CAD origin location, like the model you just saw, I went over to the left-hand side and I typed in, or I just selected these buttons here where it says Option. Under where you type in the dimensions and where you type in the base point where you want the location to be, you also can select what your base point is. So first it starts with your center. I selected it as the bottom left corner to be my base point. And then I can move it over from there if I wanted to. But I'm going to leave it at X0, Y0. A lot of customers that I run into in training, they'll move the cursor around here in the CAD workspace and they'll see, oh man, I moved it over, way out in space that I don't want it to be. That's okay. It doesn't finalize. You've just got the orange preview here, and it doesn't finalize that selection until you type in your base point selection and click OK. Or if you click here in the CAD workspace, then you've created a square here. You want to get rid of that, you can click OK, and then you can hit undo up at the top to undo that creation of your square. So now you can see my base point is somewhere in X and somewhere out in Y. I'm just going to zero those out. Again, the option for my base point is going to be at the bottom left, and I'm going to make this first square, the bottom base that I had of my example model there, I'm going to make it 6 inches by 6 inches for length and width. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and click OK. Now you can see after I clicked OK, I've got the square that I created in blue. I've got a preview for a second square that if I wanted to create a second one, I have my preview in orange there. And for now, I'm just going to cancel out, and I'm going to save my progress. And this is a good side note. Whenever I make any progress in the software program, I tend to save occasionally. And reason for that, if you lose power on your computer, the computer crashes, the software program crashes, or anything like that, you will have saved at a good stopping point here. So I'm going to just name this webinar. And I'm going to go to my just creating the base here. So I'm going to look at it on an angle by clicking and holding on my scroll wheel and moving the mouse over. If you guys have a laptop, a mouse is very necessary for this CAD software program, so you can look at it at a 3D level like this, clicking and holding on the scroll wheel of the mouse and moving my mouse over. You could also use what they call a space mouse or a 3D mouse to rotate around like this even easier. So we're looking at it on an angle in an isometric view. For the time being, if you don't have a mouse, you could also go to the top and you have these different views. We have our top view, front view, side view, and over on the right hand side we have our isometric views that you can use as well. Then I'm going to create the base of the model. I'm going to go to the top, go to Create 3D, and go to Extrude Boss. And I'm going to just window select my square, and I made it just a distance of 1 inch. That's what it normally is by default here. I'm going to leave it at 1 inch here and then click OK. Draft angle. Here, I'll show you these other options here. We have our distance. We have our draft angle to create tapered walls on the sides of the part. So if I type in 10, you can see 10-degree tapered walls. And if I needed to extrude down as well, I could do it in the other direction. and I could do a draft angle for one of the positive or negatives, or just leave them at 0. And not to confuse you guys, I'm just leaving it at the default that I had, positive direction of 1 inch, and everything else zeroed out, and then I click OK. While we're going through this, if you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments section. More than happy to help as we follow along here. We've made a 6-inch by 6-inch square, extruded it up 1 inch. Next, if we look at our final product that we're going for, we're going to do these 2 islands next on the corners. And I did that by sort of separating out the solid and the wireframe that I created on different layers. So this is where we're getting into the functionality for our layers here. Mine's over down at the bottom right corner of my screen in this tab where it says CAD and you've got the green check mark. You may have it laid out differently. If you don't see the tab for layers, you can right click up at the top and you can select your different pages that you want to open or close here by clicking on it. You can turn it off. The green check mark will be gone. Click on it again. The green check mark will be turned on, saying that it's somewhere on your page. Okay, so we're at layers. We've got the CAD layer here. I want to make a new one. I just right click on the layers window and go to add new layer. I'm going to name this wireframe. And the CAD layer, you could leave it as CAD. I'm going to rename it as solid. So I'm going to keep the solid on that layer, and I'm going to put all of my wireframe on this new layer. Now you notice that the solid and the wireframe down below it is still on the solid layer right now. To move that bottom wireframe on a different layer, I can select it and then move it to the wireframe layer I just created. Easiest way to do that, now I'll show you one way. You can go to your select mode and you can try to select just these lines down below the stock model. Kind of difficult to do because you might be selecting the solid versus the wireframe down below. So I'm going to cancel out of that. I'm going to go to my select mode again, and I'm going to window select everything. When I window select everything here, it will window select the bottom wireframe and it will select the solid model at the same time. Now I can click on the solid model a second time to deselect it, but I still have my wireframe highlighted down below here. So with my wireframe highlighted, I can move it to a different layer by right-clicking anywhere in the CAD workspace here, and then go down to Modify to Current and Modify to Current Layer. And now, once I hide the solid layer with this eyeball icon over on my Layers page, I'm hiding the layer that the solid is on, and I'm just showing my wireframe layer that the wireframe is on. Now we're going to go to the top, go to Create 2D. We're going to go to Rectangle. And to create that first rectangle down at the bottom left corner of my model, I did that base point option again as bottom left, and I left it at 2 by 2. But you can already see with the preview that if I create it like this, it's going to overlap with the bottom wireframe of the base of the solid model. So instead of having those, connected to each other or overlapping each other, before I create that, I'm going to cancel out and I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to right click on layers, add new layer. Let's name this islands. And then we can go to the top, go to create 2D, go to rectangle. With the green check mark next to islands is going to create this wireframe on a separate layer from my wireframe layer of the square there. But at least I can line it up. I can keep the wireframe layer showing so that I can make sure that it's lined up in the corners of my base model too. So we've got our 2 by 2 inch square. Option for my base point is bottom left, and I'm going to click OK. Next, I'm going to change the option of my base point from bottom left to top right. And that way I am using, that way I'm referencing the top right corner of my next rectangle to be at the location I want it to be, which is going to be at the top right of my base model, which is at x6, y6. So that is in that top right corner, just like what my example part file looks like. And then I click OK. So this is the wireframe of how it looks from my sample model here of those two islands in those two corners and the base of the model. Now I'm going to hide the wireframe layer so that I've just got those two squares showing. I'm going to go to the top, go to Create 3D, and I'm going to go to Extrude Boss again. I'm going to select both of the squares, and I'm going to extrude up a distance of 1.5 inches. And when I show the solid layer, it's showing that it's going to add to the base of that solid an extra 1/2 inch for my two islands there, above, so a 1/2 inch above the base of my model. And click OK. And now the solid's still on that solid layer. The island, the two squares here are on my islands layer. So I've got two extrude boss functions with the base and the two islands. I extruded those both at one time. Now I'm going to undo once. So we're back to just the first extrude boss. And I'm going to explain the difference between the extrude boss is to add to the solid model. Extrude cut would be to cut away from the solid model, which we'll get into a little bit later. And we'll go through explaining here the difference between extrude boss and extrude curve. Now, if I used extrude curve with these two squares, and I'm extruding it up 1.5 inches, and I click OK, those two extrusions will be separate from my base solid. So when I highlight, the base, it is a separate 3D model from each of these two cubes as well. So you have 3 separate models. That could be helpful if you are creating an assembly and maybe they're intersecting or they're touching along the side walls of, maybe you're making a vise and you're making some soft jaws and things like that, and they're touching each other. If you did extrude boss in that scenario, you would be adding to all of it. If you want to make it an assembly with separate solids, the extrude curve is the function you would want to use. So I'm going to undo, and we'll do that extrude boss again. So I'm going to hide the solid layer. I'm going to just have my islands layer at the moment. Go to Create 3D, go to Extrude Boss, and then select the two squares. Make sure the distance is in the positive direction of 1.5 inches, and then click OK. And then it creates that onto my solid of the base there. Next, we'll do the pockets. So let's create another layer for that. And I'm just going to name it Pockets. We'll go over to our example file, and this is what it looks like. I think the square here was 1 inch by 1 inch and 1/8 inch radius for each one of those. And I can make sure if I've created a solid like this and I want to get any measurements, I can go to the top and go to Evaluate and then Measure 1. And then I can measure this radius, make sure it's 1/8 of an inch here. You can go to, you can measure a line or measure anything else that you need to measure out there. So I'm going to cancel out of that measure function, and we'll create that wireframe to extrude cut down into the islands here in my new file. I'm going to go to Create 2D, and then I'm going to go over to Extract Edges. Before I extract the wireframe, let me see if you guys have any questions. David, good question. Why do the island bosses get added to the solid layer even though the green check is on island? That's a good question. So we are in, and you guys saw that. When I went into Extrude Boss, I extruded up these two islands, even though the even though the layer is active with the green check mark on pockets, it creates those two extrude bosses on my solid layer because I already have the base solid on my solid layer, and it's basically adding those two islands to the solid model, which is still going to be active on the solid layer. So you're basically adding to the base solid, and it stays on the solid layer instead of moving the whole solid over to a different layer that you have active. So that's a good point to make there. That whatever solid you start with on that layer, it's going to stay there until you move it. Even if you add to it with other extrude bosses, it's not going to change layers on you. It's going to stay on the one that you created it initially. So that's a good point. All right, so next we'll get into the pockets layer. I'm going to create the wireframe for the pockets here by going to Create 2D and going to Extract Edges. I'm going to extract the edges from the top two surfaces here of my islands and click OK. I'm going to hide the solid layer, so everything is hidden except for the pockets layer here with the wireframe that I just created on top of those two surfaces. And now I want to offset those in. So I'm going to go to Create 2D, and I'm going to go to Offset, which is that function right next to Extract Edges. And I'm going to offset these two squares. So I'm just going to hold Shift and click on each of these squares here to chain select them. And I'm going to change the distance. If you don't see the chain selection, let me move myself over here. Over the top right of my program here, you can see this picking manager. If you have that turned on, you just have to simply click on one of them. It automatically chain selects for you. I usually have it turned off. That way I have control of when I want to chain select and when I don't. So I have it turned off, and then I hold Shift and click to chain select that way. Alrighty. And now I'm going to go down in the offset function down here, and we have the distance. I'm going to change to a 1/2 inch offset, and then I'm going to click OK. Before I click OK, you'll see the direction. It's on the inside. If it's offsetting on the outside for you, you'd have to change the direction from left to right. And that's how you can change which way you want to offset it. And then click OK. Now I want the 1/8 inch radius in the corners. I can go to Create 2D, and I can go to Fillet. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 over left from your offset function. So we go to Fillet, and we can see here we have the fillet, and then below it we have between two entities. What that will do is if I click on two lines like this, it will create the radius for me. I want a radius of 1/8 of an inch, so I type in that here. To do it a little bit faster, instead of between two entities, we could select single corner click. So depending on how close I am to the corner, it will fillet that corner for me. So on this line right here, If I'm closer to the left, it's going to create that fillet. If I'm closer to the right of that line, it'll create that fillet for me. And then also, if I select chains, I can hold shift and click on a square like this or any kind of profile like this, and it will give me a fillet in every corner with an 1/8 inch radius. So those 3 picking methods could save you some time. One other option in the fillet function down at the bottom is this trim option. If I have it turned off, it will not trim away the excess corner that I would want to get rid of for my 1/8 inch radius. Sometimes you still need that geometry, so that's why we have that trim option. But I'm going to undo and I'm going to trim away that geometry in those corners. All right, and now we've got all 4 corners radiused on this one, all 4 corners with an 1/8 inch radius on the other pocket. And now I'm just going to extrude cut down from my solid model. I'm going to go to the top, go to Create 3D, go to Extrude Cut, and then I'm just going to chain select the 2 squares here on the inside. You can see it's trying to extrude cut in the positive direction of 1.5 inches. And then in the other direction, I want it to cut down. We'll do 1/4 inch, just very shallow pockets here, 1/4 inch depth. When I hit tab, it'll update the depth for me. If you hit tab in any of these entry boxes, it will update the entry there in BobCAD. Now I'm going to leave this distance in the positive direction of 1.5 inches. It has to be, I would say normally you want it to be anything other than the intersection of the solid here. And a big reason for that is sometimes BobCAD has issues with trying to extrude cut right on the solid like this with the intersection. So I usually have this positive number, something other than 0. So I'm leaving it at 1.5 inches. Sometimes you would want to be cautious if you have other solids on a different layer that are hidden, and you have a solid anywhere in space right here, you may be extrude cutting through that solid as well. So you want to be cautious of the number not being too large where you could be cutting into other solids. And then I scroll down to the bottom and I click OK. Now, if I were to create other solids in that space, I've already done the extrude cut function, so it won't cut after the fact if I created anything there, just as a side note also. All right, cool. Next, we're going to be doing this boss right in the center, and then doing the pocket here, the slot, and the circular hole in the center of it. So let me know if you guys have any questions. More than happy to answer anything else that you guys have moving forward here. But we're right on our way to getting this set up. One thing I'll also point out before we create the rest of the center here is if I maybe look at a print and they call out a different depth for the pockets here, I can easily change those by going over to my CAD tree, which is located here in my software program down at the bottom left right here, maybe somewhere else on your screen, but here's under this tab, and I can double click or I can right click and edit any of these functions at any time. So let's say it called out for a 1/2 inch depth for my pocket here. I can edit the extrude cut and I can say I want a distance of a 1/2 inch rather than a 1/4 inch, and it updates the model for me from there. I'm going to change it back to a 1/4 inch. And then you can also change the selected geometry as well. So if you double click on extrude cut, you can see your selected geometry here of the 2 pockets. You can deselect that, and then you can select other 2D wireframe to do an extrude cut with. So if you've updated the square here, maybe you needed a different radius, you can change the radius in 2D, and then you can come back to the extrude cut function here, reselect your square to cut away from it again. I just hit cancel, so it's back to the 1/4 inch there. All right, so we'll be getting into the first one, the center extrude boss right here. And let me see how far that was. I'm going to measure 2 points here. And from the base, it's 6 inches. I got a question here, David. Does undo work for changes you do in the CAD tree? Yes, good question. The undo function and the redo function up at the top of the screen is for any CAD function you do. It doesn't undo anything that you've done in the CAM process. So that's not what we're going over today. But if you did go into like a pocket milling operation in a milling job in CAM and you needed to undo, you have to go into the pocket feature and change your parameters there. It doesn't do anything in CAM. It only does all of your CAD functions. But it does everything, every CAD function that you've done in 2D, 3D. The last CAD function that I've done was my extrude cuts. So if I hit undo a few times, it would get rid of my extrude cut there. Or I can hit redo and it goes back to it. So yeah, anything in the 2D wireframe, like when I did the fillets here, it would undo those and bring it back to a corner, or it would undo anything in the CAD tree as well. Nothing in the CAM tree. So good question. All right. So I measured the 2 points from the top of this to the bottom base, and that was 6 inches. So I'm going to extrude it up from the bottom of my model here. So I'm going to hide the solid layer again. And I think I'm just going to make a new layer so that I can separate everything else, everything that I want. So I'm going to add a new layer. Let's make it, I'll name it boss. I'm going to hide the pockets layer. So now I can just focus on this boss layer and turn on and turn off the solid layer to make sure I've got it in the right location. So I'm going to go to the top, go to create 2D, and go to my rectangle function. This function is pretty useful here. So I'm going to go to, I could do center, but I think I'm going to do top for my base point option. Because then I know I'm going to be able to, that top point of my rectangle is over an X 3 inches to make it in the center of the model. And I'm going to move it up 6 inches so that it's at the top here. If I look at the solid layer, it's going to be up top here. And I'm going to make the length, I'm going to make the length a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to make the width 6 inches to get down to the bottom of my solid. And I'm going to click OK. There we go. So I'm going to cancel out of that. I want to make sure it's in the right location. I can show my solid model. I can click anywhere in the CAD workspace, and I can hit S for solid on my keyboard, and I can see the wireframe of the solid to make sure everything looks correctly, everything is lined up correctly here. And I can see the pockets, I can see the depth. I can also hit S on my keyboard to show the surfaces again. I can also hit T for transparent. So this could be helpful for holes and things like that. I want to see what the total depth is for these things. Same with the pocket. I want to see what the depth is. So S for solid, T for transparent, and W for wireframe. I never really use this ever, but it can show you like the cross section of the solid, I guess, in wireframe. You've got a whole bunch of shortcut keys. You've got your Windows shortcut functions like Control, C to copy, Control V to paste, Control Z to undo, Control Y to redo. I think you have Control P to print. And you can create your own shortcut keys as well. If you go to File and you go to Settings, you have somewhere over here, Customize Shortcuts. And you can see here the different commands. Let's say if you had your arc function right here. Right now I think I actually created this as Control Q. And if I wanted to give it another shortcut key to create an arc function, I can go down here to the bottom, add shortcut key, let's say Control C. If I hit Control C on my keyboard and it says down here below, currently assigned to, that means that Control C function is already assigned to the copy function. I can replace that. I wouldn't want to replace it because Control C is an easy one to remember. But you can replace them any which way you want, but you can give them multiple ones here, like Control W. You'll see that it says currently assigned to unassigned. So if I assign it, if I hit Control Q on my keyboard, or if I hit Control W on my keyboard now, it will automatically go into the arc function for me. The other shortcut keys that I frequently use will be Control 1, Control 2, Control 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Control 1 is your top view, Control 2 is your front view, Control 3 and 4 are your sides, 5 and 6, top and bottom, I think, and then Control 7 is an isometric view. So those are all of your different views as well. It can be really useful to move around, maneuver in the CAD workspace that way. So, what did we leave off with? We left off with the wireframe of the boss, and we want to create from here 6 inches up. So I'm going to go to Create 3D, go to Extrude Boss, just window select my rectangle here, and go a distance in the positive direction of 6 inches. And then click OK. You'll see it disappears. Just like we mentioned, it's going to be created on the solid layer because it just adds to the rest of the solid that we have there. I believe if you do extrude curve, though, it would keep that on the layer that you have active because it's not actually adding to the solid. It'll keep it separate on a separate layer. So next, we're actually getting into, like the 3D modeling portion of it, into the third dimension here, to be able to extrude cut on the side here with the circular hole, and be able to extrude cut on the front here for your slot. So let's do the hole first. Should be pretty simple. I'm going to make the circle. Let's do it in a new layer. So I'm going to add a new layer first. I'll name it hole. And then I'm going to go into the arc function to see how this is going to look. So I'm going to go to Create 2D, and I'm going to go to Arc. And you can see the circle is being created. I want it here on the side of this boss, but it's only sketching here in my top view. I need it to sketch in my side view here. Now, how do I do that? That will be the tabs down at the bottom right. The one over on my software program, maybe somewhere else on your screen, but it's right next to layers here. You can see UCS, and that stands for User Coordinate System. So you can create different coordinate systems based on where you want to sketch in your 3 dimensions. So the first one is a top UCS, which is going to be sketching in your X and Y coordinates here on top of the solid model, looking down. And then your front UCS, if you check that box, you'll see a gray plane that will be normal to the front of your 3D model. And then if you change it to side, you'll see a gray plane normal to the side here, the side of your 3D model. Now let's just work off of one of these three basic user coordinate systems. We've been drawing off of the top user coordinate system this whole time, and now we're going to sketch on the side UCS, which is on the side of the part here. And it's kind of weird, kind of makes it look backwards if I'm looking at it like this. This is our positive x coordinate, and this is our positive y coordinate going up. So that's how I'm going to be looking at it. I'm going to go to create 2D and go to the arc function, and it's going to start at that CAD origin location, and I'm going to move it over in X, and I'm going to move it up in Y. First, I'm going to change the diameter. I think my diameter was 3 inches. That should be small enough. And then we change the center point here. I'm going to move it over 3 inches, and I'm going to move it up 3 inches. And I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go to create 3D. I'm going to go to extrude cut and cut through with that hole. Now I can type in some numbers to make sure I've got it going through that boss. I can also click on either of these arrows here of the cylindrical shape of my extrude cut. So I click it once, and then I can slide it over and then click a second time to place it down how far I want to extrude cut through it, and then click OK. Now it looks like it's not on center. It's a little bit lower than in the center of this, the center boss that I have of the main solid right here. So I want it centered. So instead of working off of this side UCS and making sure I've got it in the right, taking measurements and making sure it's at the center of this boss, I'm going to go back to a top UCS, and I'm going to undo the extrude cut, and I'm going to undo the circle here. I'm going to make a new UCS so that it's a little simpler here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a new UCS in this UCS window, just like I'm adding a new layer. Now over on the left hand side, you'll see in the data entry window, you'll see some different creation options for my UCS. I'm going to name this UCS boss, because I'm going to reference the boss as my coordinate system here. Snap point is going to basically move, so my creation option for snap point will move my origin location to whatever snap point I click on. So it's basically just going to translate it up to here if I want to do that one. 3 points is a little bit little better to use, or a little more efficient. If you select 3 points, I get rid of that selected geometry here in this highlighted window. I can click on an origin location. So let's click on, where do I want to go? Let's click on right here, this corner of the boss. That's my new origin location for my CAD coordinates. If I click over here, my second selection here is my X direction, and my third selection, which I'm going to click on this point, is my new Y direction. So that's what the 3-point creation option will do. First you select your origin, then you select your Y direction, then you select, first you select your origin, then you select your X direction, then you select your Y direction. That's what 3 points is for. Translate, you're just translating from your original UCS that you're on. I'm going to use planar face. I use planar face very consistently. I don't really use cylindrical face because you're just going off of the side of the cylinder, and you really don't have a good way of selecting where on the cylinder. It's just more like on the front of it. So I usually don't use that one. And you also have a rotate feature, so you can rotate the UCS around. You really don't have to use the translate or rotate creation options here if you know how to create it in these other options. I usually use planar face. I'm deselecting or deleting all of the selected geometry here in this window, and then I'm basically just going to click on this planar face here, and it creates the UCS right at the center of the surface that I've selected. So you don't have to get the coordinates of where the center is going to be so that I can make the hole through it. It does it for me automatically. So we have that. For some of you, it may have the coordinates incorrectly. Some of you guys may have it like, I don't know, all kind of weird ways, like your X direction is going to the left when it should be going to the right. The Y axis is going down when it should be going up. So to change this, you can see down here at the bottom, you check the box modify, and then you can reverse the directions of each of the X, Y, and Z arrows here. So I click on reverse direction with this icon here, and then I click on reverse direction for the Y axis here. Now you can see it reversed the X axis again, so I'm going to click on X again so that I have my Z axis pointed outward from the surface. And then I click OK. And there is my boss UCS in the UCS manager here. I'm going to cancel out of my data entry for the UCS function here. And then I'm going to use that boss UCS that's on top of the boss to create my hole. I go to my layers. I'm on the hole layer here. I'm going to go to create 2D, go to that arc function again, and just type in my diameter of 3 inches for the hole, and I don't have to mess with the center point of where the hole is going to be. It's at X0, Y0 in the center of this planar face. And then I click OK. And then I do an extrude cut of this. So I go to create 3D, go to extrude cut. Hard to select the circle with the surface showing. I can either hide the solid layer, or again, I can just hit S for solid to hide the surfaces. That I can easily click on the circle from there, extrude cut it away by clicking OK. Now you can see the gray plane here is still showing from my UCS manager because I'm still in that boss UCS. I could have just gone back to my top UCS, and I can still do an extrude cut from the top UCS because in my extrude cut function down at the bottom, we have in the direction. So the specific direction, if it's along the Z-axis, along Z-axis is in relation to the UCS that you're on. So you're on a top UCS, and it's going to extrude cut down. It's just going to be flat because you've just got a flat shape in reference to the top UCS there. You could go back to the boss UCS, and you can cut in the direction along the Z-axis in reference to the boss UCS. What I usually do, I just keep everything in a top UCS here so that I don't have to see that gray plane interfering with everything. And I'm normally cutting along normal, which is normal to the circle that I created, or normal to the 2D wireframe that I selected for my extrude boss or my extrude cut here. And then I click OK. All right, cool. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We're going to do this last slot here, and then I'll answer any other questions that you guys have in terms of the CAD functions here in Bobcat. So just like I created the UCS for normal to the boss, I'm going to create UCS normal to the front and centered with this surface here. So let's go to UCS. I'm going to add a new UCS. I'm going to name it boss number 2. I'm going to go to planar face, and I'm going to select this as my face that the UCS is going to be normal to. And now you can see it's already at the, because I don't know if you would consider it that being the cross section, but it's, if this was a whole 6x6 rectangle, it's in the center of that surface still. It's not down here at the bottom. It's 3 inches from the base and 3 inches from the top of the surface. And then you can also see that the X direction, I want it going the opposite way because I want X positive to be to the right and Y-axis being pointed up. So I'm going to scroll down and reverse the directions of the X and Y axis here. I should be able to reverse the Z direction, but I'm basically just reversing the directions until I get it looking like this. Your X going to the right, Y-axis going up, and the Z-axis pointed towards us here. All right, and then I'm going to scroll down and click OK, and that's my new UCS. I'm going to cancel out of the create UCS function here. And when I go to this boss number 2 UCS, all of my views are relative to the UCS that I'm currently in. So if I hit Control 1 for a top view, I'm not actually in my top view of the in relation to the solid model of how I originally created it from my top UCS. I'm in a top view relative to my current UCS, boss number 2 UCS. So just sort of as a side note there, sometimes you're in a top view, you want to look at it from a top view. If you're in a front view and you're trying to look at it from a top view like this, Control 1 isn't what you need. It's actually looking at it in a front view technically with Control 1. So anyways, we'll go to boss number 2 and we'll create a slot right at the center of the UCS here. We're going to go to create 2D and we're going to go to our shape library, the one over to the right from rectangle. And in our shape library, I can click on this shape and it will give me a drop down of all of these different shapes I can select. I'm going to select this slot, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over from the first one. And then I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to change the dimension for number 1, which is our width of the slot. I think I did a 1/4 inch. Looks like I need to do a 1/4 inch so that it's small enough. Number 2 is the overall height of the slot. I'm going to make it 1.5 inches. So we've got a 1/4 inch for the width, 1.5 inches for the height of the slot, 0 for number 3. Number 3 is if you want the slot to be rotated at all. I don't want it to be rotated. And then we can scroll down and the origin is going to be x0, y0, but you can see if I zoom in close enough here, I'm going to make it so that it's at x0, y0. You can see it's off center. The reason for that is because just like in the rectangle, we have that base point option. And that's this drop down right here where it says bottom left. The bottom left corner of the slot is at the origin location at the moment. I want to change this and change it to center. So everything's centered up there. And then I click OK. One thing, I mean, you guys can keep it there, but yeah, we'll leave it there. I was going to make another layer for the slot, but I'm not going to get too crazy with it. I'm going to leave the slot on this whole layer here because it's not going to make a difference there. But if you wanted to make a new layer, put the slot wireframe on a different layer, you could definitely do that. Now, I want to get rid of the gray plane that's interfering with my solid model. When I'm zooming in and zooming out, hard to see stuff here. So I'm going to go back to my UCS, Going to go to a top UCS. So that's, we've got it back at that bottom left corner. Because when we're extrude cutting normal to the wireframe on the surface that it's normal to right now, which is that front surface. And so we go to create 3D. We go to extrude cut. I'm going to hit S to hide the solid, hold shift, and click on one of those entities of the slot here. And I'm going to move these numbers in a bit. And I want to make sure in this direction, which is going to be the other direction, it's going to be, let's just make it a 1/2 inch slot for the depth. Scroll down and click OK. Cancel out of the extrude function, hit S as in solid on my keyboard, and we've got our 3D model that we can work with, just that we did in here from my sample model. So the only other thing I could think of doing, something that can be really useful when we get into the CAM side of things. You're going to be needing to machine this down from a square piece of stock. You can turn off, let's say you've roughed it down to, let's turn this off. Let's turn, do that. So let's say we've got all of this. Let's say we've roughed out from a square piece of block, and we've left this boss in the center, and we've left the 2 islands, and we need to do the pocketing and drilling or milling of the large circular hole, and the milling of the slot as well. We want to let the CAM side of it, we want to let Bobcad know that we've machined down to here, and we can use this as our stock. We could save this as a separate Bobcad file, separate geometry to load this in for our stock model instead of, I know we're getting into CAM now, but when I go to a new job and I go to milling and I go to the stock wizard, and on my stock definition page, we have this rectangular shape here. We have this cylindrical shape. I can extrude it from wireframe, or I can select a solid model. So if I copy this model, bring it into my new file here, I can select solid, I can select the solid model, and then hit calculate stock, and then you'll see that that is, oops, maybe I have to keep it. Here we go. All right, so I go to solid, select the solid model and hit calculate stock, and then click OK. You can see the stock stays as what I selected as my solid model. So if I need to do more roughing, like get down to the pockets or do more roughing down to the bottom surface here, I can let the software know this is exactly where I left off and machine the rest of it from here. So a great way to be able to tell the software program what you need to get down to, what you're starting with. And you could see it doesn't have the pockets in here. It doesn't have the large hole or the slot in here. And I was able to turn those off very easily. I didn't hit undo or anything like that. I went to the CAD tree, and what I did was, you have a couple options here in the CAD tree to turn off some of these features. So the last one we left off with was extrude cut. Here in the CAD tree, I can right click on it and I can suppress anything individually. So it just goes back to the solid model. Let's say with the hole and with the, let's say all the way up to the pockets here, I can right click on that extrude cut for the pocket I'm just left clicking to highlight these. I can right click on this extrude cut. I can go to roll back. It's going to roll back all of the CAD functions up to that point. So then I can unroll back so that everything is turned back on. So if I want to roll back to that spot, it's going to turn everything off up until that spot. Or if I want to individually turn off the pockets here, I can right click on the extrude cut and select suppress or unsuppress. And so that's what those options are in the CAD tree to turn on and turn off different features for your extrude boss and your extrude cut to get to exactly what you need there. And yeah, that's all I have for today with our basic CAD programming. We went through a bunch of different things here with the Create 2D. We did just some basic shapes of the of rectangle and arc and our shape library to create a slot on the side here to create some basic shapes in 2D wireframe, doing some extrude boss and extrude cut features, and also creating wireframe and extrude boss and extrude cut from a different UCS here to be able to do some CAD programming on the side of your part as well, getting into the 3D realm of things. And that can be really useful, if you need to do any kind of other crazy shapes, we go to that boss UCS, and let's say I start drawing on that UCS here. I'm going to go to Create 2D, and I'm just going to go to Spline, and I can create some points, just creating a spline around like this here, and then click OK. And then I make a closed shape. I have to make sure that it is a closed shape so that when I select these three entities, the two lines I just made in the spline, it's going to cut away at that in that direction of my UCS. So it's not cutting down, it's cutting across from that boss UCS I created. So if there's any kind of crazy shape that you need to create on your 3D model, you can see you've got your corner right here and you've got this wavy shape right here. Whatever kind of contour you need like this, that's what the UCS is going to come into play for. You'll be able to sketch on a different plane and be able to extrude boss or extrude cut through that plane. So yeah, I'm gonna go back to our model that we made here. And if you guys have any questions with what we've done to make this 3D model, please let me know in the comments section. But thank you everyone for viewing the live event today, and hope to see you in the next one. It is every other Wednesday, so our next one is going to be February 19th, same time, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, to be able to view it live. We also have these recorded, so right after the live event today here, you'll be able to go back to it. If you missed a step or two, you can go back to it and replay it as many times as you need to create the solid model that we made here. Just as a verification thing, I'm going to go to Evaluate. I'm going to go to Measure 1, and I'm going to go to Pick Solid in this Measure 1 function here. And this is what I have. If you guys have area of 163.0529 inches squared, and I left off with a volume of 50.8066 cubed inches. So if you guys got the area of 163.0529 and a volume of 50.8066, then you guys did perfect. If you guys left off with a little different than that, you can go back to the recording and try again and see this verification here. But yeah, again, thank you everyone for viewing the live event today. Hope to see you in the next one. We don't have that determined yet what it's going to be. It's going to be something a little more on the basic side of things. Last webinar we did basic CAM functionality. This week we did basic CAD functionality. So we're probably going to stick to the basics until we move our way up. but we always send you guys an email after this to see what you guys want to see in the next webinar, to make sure that we have it tailored to exactly your needs in the software program. All right, I don't see any other questions, so thanks again for everyone viewing live today, and hope to see you in the next one, February 19th. All right, thanks everyone for viewing the webinar today, and hope to see you next time. Have a great day. See ya.